Let's see if Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who's got a brand new kids book out called Fame, Blame, and the Raft of Shame. Congressman, is it possible to mandate the whole country watch Fox and Friends?
Huh. Well, that'd be an interesting.
Right?
I don't think so. I don't think I could do that for you.
Because you're in the minority.
You guys are doing just fine.
Right. We are doing okay. We are #1 already, so we're fine.
Hey, what do you make of all these shortages? I mean, we're hearing you need to buy your Christmas presents now, Christmas tree shortages. We know bacon is up 17%, beef is up more than 12%, fish, seafood, eggs, poultry, everything's through the roof now. Gasoline prices.
Yeah, Americans are struggling on this. It's probably why you should go buy Fame, Blame, and the Raft of Shame, because it is produced and shipped right here in America. But seriously, you like that plug? But seriously, this has been a long time problem now, and it's for a variety of reasons. So it's hard to narrow down exactly what we should do about it. It's labor shortages domestically. There's not enough truck drivers to get some of these goods off of the cargo ships. It's COVID restrictions and protocols that slow down the entire process and create these bottlenecks at our ports. And everybody's feeling it, and it just compounds. The supply chain issues, they compound one after another. And whatever business you're in, you can't seem to get what you need, nor can you find workers. So what can we do domestically? What we should be encouraging the Biden administration to do is really the opposite of what they're doing. I mean, they should be doing pro-growth policies that encourage more hiring. If we're going to incentivize anything, it shouldn't be incentivizing workers to stay at home. It should be incentivizing them to come back to work.
Sure.
Okay. Republicans have been putting that forth that kind of legislation for just about a year and a half now, whether that's like work bonuses or whatever it might be.
But Dan, is this a big enough deal? I had a CEO just write me now and just say, this is so important to unload the ships and drive the trucks. Is it enough to mobilize the military to do it? After all, when you talk about prices in goods and you talk about shortages, isn't this a national emergency?
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I'm not sure what would be involved in that, and even if that would help, it's not as if that we have access to. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, possibly. But it's like we have to be thinking of creative ideas like that. To be perfectly honest, this is what happens when Republicans haven't been in charge for a couple years, able to pass common sense legislation. We've been trying to pass legislation, for instance, that streamlines the process for getting qualified truck drivers on the road at all. But of course, you could pass that right now. It doesn't necessarily flip a switch, and you have 10,000 truck drivers. So, you know what? You're right. National Guard folks, a lot of them are qualified to drive trucks. It's an interesting point to make. And when our economy needs to recover, wants to recover, but can't because it's constricted by these factors, then yeah, you've got to take some action.
Well, and I think your point earlier when you were talking about your new book that we're going to talk about in a minute is it's made in America. And unfortunately, this country has become dependent on stuff that's made someplace else. And then when COVID hit, everything shut down. It's taken so long to get back up to speed because they didn't anticipate the demand. It's all supply and demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of places shut down, production fell through the floor, and then people, a few weeks later said, look, we want to buy things, whether it's online or whether going out to the retail stores, and that surge in demand caused this dramatically. It's also causing it dramatically for energy prices. And you're seeing that around the world, especially in places like Europe that have been implementing their own version of a Green New Deal for quite a while now. They simply don't have the capacity to deal with an upcoming winter, so they're importing more coal, they're importing more Russian gas. China is doing the same, is vastly ramping up their coal production. And I keep saying this over and over again, what we should be doing is exporting our U.S. natural gas, which is extremely plentiful, to the rest of these countries. Instead, what does this administration do? Attacks our oil and gas companies and tells OPEC to turn up the heat. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, your governor, Greg Abbott, is banning any entity from enforcing a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. What's your reaction to that, and what are the folks in Texas saying?
Look, I hate that we have to play this game, right? This isn't the right way to govern, go from mandate to mandate against a mandate. It's not the right way to govern. I still generally believe in this whole freedom of association principle where you can associate with people you want to associate with as an employer or as an employee. But here's the thing, the federal government already took that first step, and they're still in the process of writing the rule under OSHA that would require businesses to vaccinate their employees or have them fired.
Right.
This is an absurd rule. This is such an overreach. It's unconstitutional. And so these reactions you're seeing from the states are, well, they're a reaction to that overstep in the first place. And Governor Abbott did what he had to do in order to protect Texas businesses. I mean, this is already, even though the rule has not technically been implemented yet,
Right.
it already has a chilling effect on businesses. A lot of CEOs who you know, they're either woke or they're so risk averse that it's pathological. They immediately implement this kind of stuff. And you know what? People are fighting back. We've all been seeing what's going on with Southwest. People are fighting back. They don't want to be told what to do. They know it's not practical. They know it's not necessary. A lot of these people have natural immunity. You know, if you're a pilot, you're sitting away from everybody. It's not like you're in a crowded area.
Joke.
I mean, we just don't need to be doing this.
And Dan, here's the other thing. Look at the tone. Look at the tone of the uniter. You know, just vilifying unvaccinated people as just the dregs of the earth, not even bringing up that 36 states have a decrease in the Delta virus. And like Israel and the UK, it's fallen off a cliff. Instead of trying to turn the corner, he's trying to get his ratings up by vilifying the unvaccinated. Here's one of them, Sean Walker, an airline pilot who says, you can fire me because I'm not getting it. Listen.
Heard from fellow pilots all over, from all airlines, and a lot of us are facing the same situation, but this goes far beyond the pilots because it's not just airline pilots. Sure, there's airline pilots speaking out and you're seeing it kind of in the forefront of news, but it's the flight attendants, it's the ground personnel, it's everyone who works for these major airline corporations. My health and my medical choice is more important to me than my career at this point. And I believe standing up for this and all the Americans who feel the same way as I do is my career is a small sacrifice.
Dan, his wife's a pilot too, so both of them, because they're not going to get vaccinated by November 24th, they're both going to be out of work. He talked to some other pilots, and one guy he said was a single dad, and he's worried about feeding his family.
You know what's infuriating about all this is we already have a shortage of pilots as well. Yeah. We have, it's hard to recruit people into the military because you're seeing an exodus from the military as well. People just willing to throw away their careers because they don't want to take the vaccine. Now the military is obviously a little different than a private organization, but the same problem keeps bubbling up. Why are we doing this? You know, it's just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And we're at a point now where well over 70% of the country is vaccinated. And then if you add in natural immunity to that, there's a very high percentage of the country that is protected to a pretty high extent from this disease. We can call it good. We've already seen the downdrop. We know that based on the experience of the past 2 years, you're going to see these spikes every once in a while. Now, we're probably closer to the end of that, and this starts to look a lot more like the flu. We can stop panicking. We can stop forcing people to deal with it the way we'd like them to deal with it because it makes us feel better. You know, it's time to start looking at the science and what works and what doesn't, and accept what we cannot change as well, and stop forcing people into positions they don't want to be in.
Well, let's see what they do. I see the Houston skyscape behind you, the skyline. Down in Texas, the Fox drone team took a shot, Dan, of about $100 million worth of the border wall and border wall supplies.
Sickening.
That they simply are not going to use. It's just going to stay there until who knows what happens. A Texas wind blows it away.
Till we get a Republican president.
This is just one of the reasons why people hate Washington. You are calling for the impeachment of the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, after canceling this. Explain more.
So, yeah, and I don't just say that. You know, I don't use that term loosely. I don't think it's a good thing to do. I think some people just scream impeachment every time a politician does something they don't like. I'm not doing that here. I think there's very clear examples of a deliberate dereliction of constitutional duty on the part of the Secretary of Homeland Security.
To protect the country.
It's not just to protect this country. It actually has very little to do with the cancellation of the border wall contracts. I think that's infuriating, but But the real dereliction of duty is simply refusal to actually enforce the laws of our country. And those laws might be our asylum process laws. Those laws might be internal enforcement inside where deportations are necessary. Or those laws might be simply crossing the border illegally. And the only action that DHS has taken has been against those border agents trying to do their job on horseback, trying to stop people from rushing the border. And so this is very deliberate, and see, intent matters when you're accusing somebody of what is effectively a crime. And in this case, I think he deserves impeachment, absolutely.
He knows better. Now the President of the United States is going to have a virtual G20 and today discussed coordination. You shouldn't even use that word with Afghanistan, but coordination on Afghanistan. The Taliban, by the way, added to us that they will not do anything to stop ISIS or al-Qaeda, but we are agreeing to give humanitarian assistance. I would like total transparency on that. What is your take? If he doesn't get an earful from the NATO, who is left out in the cold in the G20, I don't know when would they will. They're probably going to let him have it, I imagine.
Well, I would hope so. I think the rest of the world is frustrated with how Biden pulled out of Afghanistan and left us with this mess, which, look, you're going to continue to hear horror stories coming out of Afghanistan, whether it's girls' schools closing, girls being kidnapped, public hangings, the economy completely crashing, all of it. I mean, none of this was done responsibly. I'll be interested to see what kind of humanitarian aid the G20 comes up with. But look, we can't trust the Taliban. They won't work with us on any counterterrorism. They've said that multiple times. They said, we'll take care of it ourselves. They'll take care of ISIS. Now, they may not like ISIS because they have issues with them internally, but they certainly like al-Qaeda. And there's no reason to think that they're ever going to stop al-Qaeda. And in fact, intel shows that al-Qaeda is back on track to grow and to reconstitute. So this is a problem of epic scale.
Congressman, tell us about your new book, the children's book.
Sure. So, look, we look at this problem where kids are exposed to plenty of children's books that are woke and progressive. Often, as we're seeing all over the country, schools are infusing CRT within their curriculum. They hide it under the guise of diversity and inclusion. It's time for conservatives to have an answer to that. It's time for conservative parents to be able to pick from a set of tools and provide that to their child. So I partnered with Brave Books. You can go to bravebooks.com to get this. It's the only place you can get it, by the way. You can't get it on Amazon. It's bravebooks.com. And you can get my book. It's the most recent in what's going to be a long saga. A saga that centers itself around this place called Freedom Island with the same characters, a lot of the same locations. When you get this book, the kids get a big map of Freedom Island, and it's very interactive. You'll get a mission. You'll get it in a cool envelope. There's games to play with your parents in the back of the book to really hammer in the lessons that we're trying to teach. And mine, as you can imagine, might be about cancel culture. So my book is about cancel culture, how to overcome it, how to forgive, and what cancel culture is and what it isn't. Because these are nuanced conversations, and we distill that into a fun story that kids can relate to.
Well, it sounds like you put a lot of work into it. For folks who would like to get it, it's at bravebooks.com. It's called Fame, Blame, and the Raft of Shame. He's a rhymer. Congressman, thank you very much.
Dan, let me ask you one quick question. What age group for the book?
Oh, geez, young. Definitely for younger kids. Probably under 8, but.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll go buy it.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, Dan Crenshaw.
Although I bet a lot of kids over 8 would probably like it too.
Yeah,
right. Let's get through it quick.
And stuff like that.
Well, parents do want to know how to talk to their kids about these topics, and so.
Or better yet, hand the book and go. Tell me if you have any questions.
Well, you don't want to scare the kids.
Right.
Just saying.